Welcome to the Doom Scroll News Report here on Radio Taiwan International, where I, Amanda Stevens, and my co-host,
Anna Belinsky,
two writers, political by necessity, cover some of the biggest international news stories dominating our news feeds from the last week. I'm Amanda Stevens, and this week we're tackling the robbery at the Louvre last week. Afghanistan and Pakistan agreed to ceasefire for a conflict I feel like I didn't even know about, and the effects of the Amazon Web Services blackout. To be honest, writing this week's episode felt more like an amuse-bouche of some of the news stories I never felt like I got more than a headline or text post of information about on social media last week.
Why has it felt so busy?
That's what I wanted to ask you was did any of these headlines come across your dashboard or even affect your life? Because I feel like I've been doing catch up on the news when we work in the news.
I know. No, it's been like every other week we get very, very busy, and then one week it feels very slow. So I don't know. It's very come and go. But this week has definitely felt extra newsy.
Right. Well, and also I feel like news stories that I was oh, that's been happening? Oh, that happened?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's crazy. So this is going to be sort of us catching up and kind of a larger meta discussion of why do we think these news stories are not breaking through as much? So I guess let's just get into it. We're going to be starting with the Afghanistan-Pakistan ceasefire. As I just alluded to, I found the headline very jarring because I didn't know that there was a conflict.
I saw this headline just briefly amid all of the other news I was following, and I was aware that sometime earlier this month, some fighting broke out between Afghanistan and Pakistan, but it did get smothered amid all of the news, especially about what was happening in Gaza and in Ukraine, too, for that matter.
So in case you're like me, let me tell you what happened. On October 10th, a conflict broke out that was described by Reuters and CNN as the worst conflict between the two countries since 2021. The start of the conflict were attacks by militant groups against Pakistan along the contested border it shares with Afghanistan. Pakistan accused Afghanistan of aiding the groups via sheltering them, which Kabul denied. However, the conflict escalated from there with Pakistani airstrikes in Afghanistan. And last week, a suicide attack on the border that killed 7 Pakistani soldiers and wounded 13. Luckily, last Saturday, both countries agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire. Actually, I think that was on Wednesday. They agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire while they attended peace talks mediated by Qatar and Turkey. That ceasefire was extended, and although imperfect because retaliatory violence continued during that ceasefire, the two countries did eventually agree to an immediate total ceasefire Sunday following talks in Doha. To quote CNN, both sides agreed to, quote, stop fighting and work toward lasting peace and stability, end quote. So rather than asking about the conflict, Hannah, what I wanted to ask is, what do you make of the fact that altercations like this one are muted, as you said, or potentially even smothered by the current global news cycle?
So I'm not minimizing it by any means, but it's one of a few global conflicts to be read about in the news at this point, and the other two have simply been part of the public consciousness for a lot longer, I think.
Yeah.
And crucially, this conflict, as well as the India-Pakistan one that broke out for a while, we covered on the program previously, they're not being drawn out. In both cases, the two parties were fairly quick to de-escalate after a short period of fighting. So I think that's probably the main reason why it didn't really take center stage.
Part of me was also wondering if another reason it didn't break through is because this is one of those ongoing conflicts. And reading about it, and if people check out our links, at least since the Taliban took back power, militant groups which are associated with the Taliban but not state funded, according to the Afghan government, have been attacking Pakistan ever since. And so I can understand where Pakistan would be frustrated because they keep fielding these attacks from these militant groups who are trying to destabilize the Pakistani government.
I went and got a little bit more educated about the regional conflicts surrounding Pakistan because I was like,
why are they at the middle of all these things?
Always, but they do run into issues kind of regularly with their
constantly,
neighbors. India, Afghanistan, Iran, and actually to some extent China as well, even though they are technically strategic allies and for multitude of reasons. So,
I mean, even Afghanistan and Pakistan are technically allies.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like basically this year I've been learning a lot about how Qatar truly is like a Middle Eastern Switzerland, I feel like.
Not just they're the wealthiest ones, but also that they are the peacemaker, the mediator.
Right, everybody goes to Qatar to talk. And also that Pakistan, however I feel about other politics, is like constantly on the defense offense.
Yeah, I think there's probably something happening domestically that I don't have enough expertise in to comment on that's causing these cycles to repeat. So,
well, we don't have time to say anymore because we got 2 other topics. The second story I wanted to talk about is the robbery of the Louvre, which I confess the first time that I saw this headline, I thought was almost comical.
Oh, me too.
Because it seemed so unlikely and it just seemed so, like, I couldn't even imagine something like that would have happened.
No, the immediate thing that jumped in my mind was, recession indicator, you know? Like,
I know.
Didn't take it serious.
The other thing that kind of surprised me was that, like, I still had friends who didn't know that it had happened when I was like, this is the Louvre. This is one of the most famous museums in the world, I think.
Arguably the most famous, I would say.
Arguably the most famous, at least art museum, potentially. So, again, like, let's get into what happened, and then we'll discuss the repercussions of it. So last Sunday, another thing happening on Sunday, a group of thieves broke into a gallery on the 2nd floor of the Louvre Art Museum just after it opened. They drove up with a truck-mounted ladder, which was obtained by claiming they were moving house, sawed through a window, and then basically did a smash and grab in just around 4 minutes, grabbing 8 pieces of royal jewelry, which had been on display. Although one of those was dropped during the escape and has been recovered. While I could describe the pieces, I think it's better if listeners go look them up because they are really beautiful and, you know, pictures, 1,000 words, blah, blah, blah. Of those, that's the crown thing again. As of recording, the culprits haven't been found, and they claim that the motive is unknown, but I would guess that it's the fact that the sets are worth over $100 million US, according to a state estimate. And that's only if they remain intact, which is something we'll be talking about in a second. One of the most shocking things is how brazen the robbery was. According to New York Times, Ségolène Le Stradic, so sorry, dude, someone did come to check on the ladder, but they were threatened away. And they later filed a police report in a town 22 miles away, also called Louvre.
Like, come on.
Wild coincidence. Anyway, breezing past that. Hannah, how did the news of the robbery sit with you? Like I said, at first I thought it was comical, but then I kind of sat with it and I digested it, and I got really kind of depressed and sober about it because I was like, these are really, truly national treasures.
This is just the kind of headline you don't believe at first.
Yeah.
Like, somebody burgled the Louvre for French crown jewels.
A smash and grab. It was literally a smash and grab.
It's like something out of a James Bond movie.
Yeah.
But the truth is, of course, so much more boring. It wasn't like they were dancing through laser beams or manufacturing fake fingerprints or anything. They just busted some glass.
Yeah.
It's really such a primitive way to rob anybody, much less one of the most famous museums literally on Earth. Now,
I feel like it is.
I think so. I mean, the Mona Lisa's in there. Everybody knows the
Mona Lisa.
Mona Lisa.
The Mona Lisa also only got famous because it was stolen.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So there is a history of it, but I'm not going to get into that because I'm not going to be blaming anyone or anything about this. So,
well, being said, though, they did seem to pick exactly the right window. So they must have done their homework. But it is such a simple heist on its face that the first thing I thought was it must be an inside job. But the fact is it also could have just been that easy. It certainly looked that way.
Right. Well, and to your point, like, besides being brazen, the other shocking thing that was brought to light by, for me, The Guardian's reporting and the BBC, is how professional it was, despite us describing this as a smash and grab. Like, they seemed to know a lot about the Louvre security. The window they picked was perfectly accessible. It was out of line of sight of the only camera in that gallery where the robbery took place. The fact that the timing made it sort of impossible for the guards to get there fast enough. There was a lot of things that seemed very well planned out.
They really got it right, yeah.
But this isn't necessarily me blaming the Louvre because it also has some difficulties in keeping things safe because the building is historic. People don't want to like bar the windows or install a lot of infrastructure that might damage the foundations of the building. Also, like the Louvre director Dakar pointed out that Security, including external CCTV, is weak, and the plans to renovate that security won't take place until 2026. So she actually did raise concerns about security earlier, but the plans to fix that haven't been carried out. There's also the difficulty in just how many visitors come through the Louvre every day. So trying to control that number of people is crazy.
I can't imagine they ever have a slow season,
No.
when they could do renovations.
Even right now, they're almost comical about the Guardian article is like a new tourist attraction is going to go see the broken window of the Louvre.
Go figure.
So there's also the tragedy that I alluded to before, which is that the pieces are not insured because of how crazy expensive it would be, and that people now suspect they're probably going to be broken up.
So sad.
Right, because nobody's going to buy the stolen Louvre national necklaces that were stolen. So they're really hoping that people don't break them up because they're way more valuable in one piece, but they're currently worried that they're just going to be smashed for the jewels and then have those sold. So
I feel like they would still be able to know, right? That the gemstones came from these pieces.
I don't know. It's do you know and do you care, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
But anyway, France has been kind of dealing with a lot government-wise. Their prime minister resigned, I think, after just a month in service.
Oh yeah, it's been a little bit interesting over there.
But I guess hearing all of this, do you think that there's any more steps the government could or should be taking to preserve such culturally important items?
Well, I think it's a little late for that now, but as a post-mortem, I think nobody probably believed or wanted to believe that anyone would actually steal those pieces.
Right.
It's kind of like how when you're in Taiwan, people tend to put blind faith in the public not to steal something
The jade
valuable.
cabbage.
Yeah. No, not even just that. It's you could just leave your MacBook out and, 9 times out of 10, nobody's going to take it. But your MacBook is one thing. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of historic Napoleonic jewelry is something else.
When I think that sort of came across to me and the reporting on it was however you feel about the Napoleons or whatever, now that we are where we are, these are thought of as sort of things of national pride. So it seemed like a lot of people were very upset in the same way that it's obviously why would you steal that? That's something that we thought belonged to everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, talking about something that does affect everybody, I'm going to speed on to our final topic right after this. All right, so going on to something, as I said, that does affect everyone. This final story has been nagging me because it's literally been dogging me all week. This has been the shadow of my week. On Monday, while writing the news, my coworker told me that she was unable to produce a thumbnail for the video we were uploading because the service we use, Canva, was experiencing technical difficulties. And that was how I was introduced to the fact that Canva was an Amazon-dependent service, and also that Amazon's web service, or AWS for the rest of this story, was down. So, Hannah, do you know what AWS is?
No, I had no idea. I had no idea this existed. Of course I didn't.
Yeah.
Because
Why would you?
Why would I?
Why would you? We're not computer people. We're writers. We
Yes.
say it every week.
And I would argue I guess only computer people would know because most of the general public probably wouldn't.
So I learned this week about AWS. Basically, AWS is a rentable web service that ranges from everything from cloud storage to computer processing power, meaning literally tasks you need any computer to do, to networking, middleware, and even, as I said, virtual access to computer systems. So through your own device, accessing what looks like a regular computer, but the physical hardware for that computer is somewhere else.
Yeah.
This means that rather than every service that you use that uses AWS doesn't need to keep its own data center or as large of a data center because they can basically rent processing power in one of Amazon's. It's like how most of us pay a power company for electricity rather than generating our own, which is an analogy I got from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Renting web space isn't necessarily a problem, or renting data space, I guess, because it takes a lot of time and resources to have your own physical data centers, obviously. But the real meat and potatoes of this issue is the sheer scale of affected services. Or another way to put this problem I'm going to introduce is the number of services which are reliant upon AWS. So to give you an idea of where I'm going with this topic, I'm going to give a definitely not exhaustive list of the affected services that I found name dropped all throughout the week. These include Venmo, PayPal, Canva, Roblox, Robinhood Online Brokerage, Coinbase Crypto Exchange, Snapchat, Reddit, Netflix, Starbucks, PlayStation Network, Ring doorbells, Roku, Duolingo, obviously Amazon and Amazon services like Alexa, and even some phone carriers like Verizon. Hannah, there were even smart beds, which I learned were a thing I was upset about, which were affected because, and the affectations included them being heated to uncomfortable positions, and in one quote I saw, being stuck in an upright position.
That'll teach you to buy a smart bed.
What?
It was funny. I didn't happen to need...
so upset.
I didn't happen to need most of these services while the blackout was happening. The only thing I happened to notice was that Reddit was bugging out really bad. And I doom scroll with Reddit a lot. So I was like, that's weird. And the thought that occurred to me was actually that, maybe China is cyber attacking Taiwan.
Didn't need to.
That's just where my head has been at
lately. I know.
But actually the truth was much more insidious.
So... The thing is, if you experienced any connectivity issues or any issues with any number of services over this last week, it's probably because that service uses AWS. Or even worse, they may not be subscribed to AWS, but the service that they do rely upon is subscribed to AWS. I'm going to do my best to kind of unpack the Russian nesting doll that is our web services that we use. Because the thing that really got me was realizing how much of our services are dependent on a small number of providers. CNN's Claire Duffy thought the same thing, noting that, quote, together, AWS, Microsoft, and Google, 3 companies, account for around 70% of the market, end quote. And that's the market of web services provided to the globe. The CNN article goes on to point out that the problem could get worse with AI becoming the new backbone of many daily tasks, which is something that we're seeing from banks like Goldman Sachs out like hiring fewer people because they're having more AI services do some of the menial tasks, to even doctors' offices and hospitals. So the other problem with this is that AI, as we know, is very power hungry and requires large data centers, which is also why some of these companies might want to rent out service from an already large data center. The AWS case was luckily relatively low stakes for a lot of things. For most people, it just meant that you couldn't schedule an appointment, or your Duolingo streak was in trouble. That happened to my boyfriend. That's a real life example. We were delayed making a thumbnail for 2 hours. And the problem was mostly fixed by Thursday. But the ripple effects are still being felt today. If you're still having bugged out systems, it probably is because of the AWS blackout. A BBS article also points out that even though there are 3 large companies, their infrastructure is interwoven together, which means that even if you rent web services from, say, Google, some of the software that Google services depend upon may be stored in an Amazon computer. So I could go on, but I mostly want to ask you, Hannah, what you make of the fact that so much of our internet services, and by extension, our daily services, are reliant upon a small number, 3, literally 3 providers.
I mean, you know how I feel about monopolies.
You and I are very against them. We bring it up every time, and I will continue to do so.
What's really mind-boggling about this is how little I knew just how much power, I guess, Amazon had consolidated. And, on the one hand, I found the blackout kind of humorous because, you know, people's Internet of Things devices, their so-called smart devices, were basically unusable during the blackout. And you mentioned the smart beds. This is, of course, I think a largely rich person, or, people who have the kind of money to spend on gadgets. This is mostly their problem because only they tend to get crap like that anyway. I mean, I had a little chuckle, I won't lie, about them being unable to, sleep in their smart bed, or their stupid Tesla being bugged out or whatever.
Right.
It's really interesting to me, though, that these devices are called smart. It's such a misnomer because a lot of them simply are not designed to operate offline, or they end up with limited functionality.
Well, and that I want to dig in it just a little bit more, because the thing about the smart beds was, even though they're called smart beds, even the people who made them didn't believe that they had to be connected online. Wow. They didn't believe that they were reliant upon being connected online until the AWS blackout, when their online connectivity was interrupted, so far as I understand the story. And that's what caused the problem. So even some of the stuff that we design, we may not understand how interconnected it is.
I think we can guess that, I think moving forward, it's probably safer to assume that a smart device is only as smart as the internet connection is good. And I think now it seems like they're starting to scramble to establish some local backup systems.
Yeah.
For control in the event the servers go down again.
Yeah.
But, we probably shouldn't have all the servers in one spot, under just a few companies.
And also, notably, the BBC pointed out, all also in the United States.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea. And, and it's all connected to the one cloud. God, how I hate the cloud.
The cloud.
I hate the cloud.
I do want to do a special on the cloud someday. It's coming. Y'all watch out.
A regular KitchenAid appliance will never fail you.
I never want a smart toaster.
Or a smart fridge.
I can't insist how enough. Yeah. I don't want that.
And they just send you ads, and they just gather. I looked up why on earth a smart bed would need internet connectivity at all times. It's because they're collecting biometric data about you, presumably so they could push ads to you about how you sleep.
Now, I will take another second to point out that even though AI could make the problem worse, at the end of the CNN article, the expert they were talking to did point out the fact that AI actually might be able to help the problem in a couple of ways. One, because some of these AI servers might demand a portion of this market share, and they're trying to make their own data centers, their own physical data centers. Number two, AI could actually be trained to stop these blackouts if we were to use it for something like this.
Useful.
However, he noted that that's not where a lot of the development money is going. It's going towards flashier things like chatbots and generations. However, if we were to apply, I'm an AI doomer, but we could be using this to help us avoid things like this in the future. It's just sort of a matter of where we decide to invest.
I really do think it would be fine used as a tool, but everybody wants to use it to do sci-fi futurism stuff. Oh, and art theft. Yeah. How about that?
That's my biggest. Can you tell I have a chip? Did you see it? Did you see it fly off my shoulder when I said that? Anyway. I would end this by saying I really, really encourage people to go read about the interconnectedness of it, because if you don't think it affects you, you just don't know where it is. And we have a couple of articles about that, but this was very elucidating for me.
Yes. And, I'll say one thing. The more online we get, the more offline I think future generations are going to want to be.
Or need to be.
As a way to rebel, I'm kind of... I'm hoping, praying that my son's generation will be wanting to be off-grid,
Yeah, one can hope.
One can hope.
Anyway, that's all the time that we have for today. As always, the show notes, I forget, blah, 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 blah. As always, there's a reminder that you can find our referenced articles in the show notes for today's episode. Talk about being offline. I don't even remember the script without my phone. That's disappointing. Thanks for joining us on air today. Tune in tomorrow for more programs by Radio Taiwan International. I was Amanda Stevens.
I'm Hannah Valinsky.
And in the meantime, remember to stop scrolling, get off your phone, and touch grass.
Catch the latest RTI news, programs, previews, and more on our website, rti.org.tw. That's rti.org.tw.